World War II was a historical event in which actions took place that significantly impacted our world today. Beginning on September 1st, 1939, these actions caused great changes in the lifestyles of all Americans. The war began when Britain and France declared war after Germany launched an unprovoked attack on Poland. The two opposing sides of the war were Axis powers and the Allies. Lots of people were needed for the war effort. Gender roles played a large role in society in the means of what people should and should not be obligated to do. Men were viewed highly upon, while women were not. Men and women were given separate jobs.
Before the war, women took care of their families and men earned money by working. Each gender had their own set of roles they were expected to comply to. Men were called to fight mainly through either draft or volunteer. The deficiency of men in factories and important jobs was caused by a large amount of them enlisting in the war. Women were then called upon to fill these empty roles and serve for their country. It was propaganda that promotes women to join the war effort. World War II influenced the type of work women did, as well as the volume at which they received it. About 5 million women enlisted in the workforce in between the years of 1940 and 1945. Nursing, working in factories, being fire and evacuation officers, and drivers were only some of the roles women filled during this time. Moreover, women were involved with the Women's Army Corps, also known as the WAC. The WAC was created on May 15, 1942 by Public Law 554, and it was developed to allow American women to serve in non-combat positions. Consequently, once this organization was established, more than 150,000 women were able to assist in World War II. By 1943, the majority of workers in America were women. Without these women, many necessary jobs wouldn't have been fulfilled, and the economy could have crashed. Many basic needs would not have been met if it weren't for the women who were available for these interim positions.
For women, working in the Army was an eye-opening experience. These women were given a much larger purpose than they had ever been given before.
Lots of propaganda promoted the role of women in the war. The propaganda encouraged women to work by saying that the more they worked, the sooner their husbands would return home. The Rosie the Riveter campaign was a form of propaganda which had a goal to recruit females to work during World War II. Although the true identity of Rosie the Riveter is ultimately unknown, she became the most iconic image of working women. This picture exemplified the strength that women had, as well as the hardships they were able to overcome. The patriotic need of women to enter the workforce was stressed within this campaign. Unlike other propaganda for women joining the war, the Rosie the Riveter campaign portrayed women as strong and independent. Rosie became a new image and inspiration to women in the war.
In addition to gender discrimination, women also faced racial discrimination. Black women were able to join the Army Nurse Corps beginning in January of 1941, although the maximum amount of women able to join at the time was 56. However, in June of 1943, a congresswoman from Ohio named Frances Payne Bolton established an amendment to the Nurse Training Bill. This amendment helped to eliminate racial bias, allowing about 2,000 black women to register into the Cadet Nurse Corps. In addition, racial bias decreased in July of 1944 when the quota for black Army nurses was removed.
About 60,000 American nurses served in what was called the Army Nurse Corps in World War II. These women's persistence positively correlated directly to the post-injury mortality rate of American soldiers. Less than 4% of American soldiers who received medical care from these nurses passed away from wounds or disease. The need of nurses elucidated the requirements for the nursing profession.
In this clip, during the war, female nurses are portrayed. They aid the men in the battlefields and tend to them when they are in need of assistance. This video shows how diligent and hardworking these women were during World War II. Many women worked in factories while given the job to produce munitions and build ships and airplanes. This was perceived as a laborious and manly job that women were unlikely to be able to fulfill. When they reassured the male aspect of society about that idea, women were believed to be too masculine. The job suppliers supported women in multiple ways, such as giving them lessons on how to apply makeup. It was believed that keeping American women looking up to par was important for the morale of the economy. The war came to an end on September 2, 1945, about a week after Hitler committed suicide. The Allied powers defeated their opposing side when the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, surrendered. Men and women alike returned home from the war. Soon after, their gender roles returned to their previous states. Men took back their jobs from before, forcing women to be reinstated into the jobs they were given initially. They returned to taking care of their children and households.
Resulting from women's successful roles in the war, multiple new laws were created. The Women's Army Corps, which is the female branch of the United States Army, was converted into active duty on July 1, 1943. Both the American public and Army officers had trouble acknowledging the idea of female soldiers. These females worked in over 200 non-combatant jobs stateside and in every theater of the war. By the year 1945, there were over 100,000 members of the Women's Army Corps.
Shown here is the scrapbook of a Women's Army Corps member.
In 1948, Congress passed the Women's Armed Service Integration Act, which gave women permanent status in the military. It also stated that up to 2% of the total Army forces in each branch could be women. Soon after, the first set of females were instated to service academies in 1976. These women faced lots of prejudice from men. Lastly, the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was established on June 10th of that year. This act was brought upon in order to eliminate the wage gap between genders. In 1963, the wage gap was that women earned 59 cents on average for every dollar made by men.
The Women's Air Force Service Pilots, or WASPs, were women who had received their license to pilot. As one of the lesser-known roles that women played in war effort, the WASPs became the first women to fly American military aircrafts. Their job included ferrying planes from factories to bases, transporting cargo, and participating in stimulation bombing and target missions. They were able to accumulate more than 60 million miles in flight distances and freeing thousands of male U.S. pilots for active duty during the war. About 1,000 WASPs served in position, and 38 of these women sadly lost their lives. It wasn't until 1977 that the Women's Air Force Service pilots gained full military status. Therefore, these fallen pilots were not granted any benefits.
Despite American women being given the opportunity to fill positions left vacant by men during World War II, after the war, these positions were all reversed. This positive evolution of traditional female gender roles faced a wave of social regression shortly after.